If I could get my food entrepreneurs up here, please. You know who you are. I've got to say, Paul, I did not recognize you when you walked in. It's great to see you. Paul is up in Kingston at Iggy's, and if you haven't had his June, not kombucha, it's kind of kombucha, but technically it's June. He'll tell you more about that. You really should. Anna, Cody, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so we will go ahead and I'll just start by picking on Paul. So there you go. And you can pass that around. You know, all these three businesses, you know, I didn't talk about this at the top, but it's been a minute for it's been not the world's easiest couple of years for our small businesses, right? And that includes our restaurants. Some of our restaurants are having a tough time. Where I live in Port Orchard, a couple of them have closed. So we're going to hear from our food entrepreneurs about what their realities are like. But before we do that, you all have great origin stories. Heroic origin stories about the cool companies and restaurants and food businesses you run. So I'm going to ask the three of you to tell us about your origin stories. So Paul, would you start with the origin of Iggy's?
Thanks, Joe, for inviting me, and thanks for having me as a guest here. I'm always happy to talk about Iggy's. And so, like you see here, we started back in 2012. And one of the things that makes Iggy's unique is that we do all kinds of fermenting. I can talk for hours and hours about it, but I'll spare you all from that. And instead, I made sure to have a couple of pictures. Since they're worth 1,000 words, I figured that would save time for everybody. So if you can see our mission here, I'll let you guys read that for yourself, but our idea here is that as a food business and as a restaurant, it's food and table is where we come together. It's something that absolutely everybody has in common. So this is core to the theme of Iggy's and why we persist despite all those challenges that Joe alluded to. It's because at that one place, on this one issue, that we all have something in common, we can really come together through that. So this is the pictures that's going to save me hours of talking. These are some of the products that we make, the lines of business we're in. We're unique in that we're a food manufacturer, that we're not only a beverage manufacturer, but we're also a fermenting house, radically different activities. So that indicates a certain amount of mental disturbance that we have to have and idealism in order to engage on it. And you see a little picture there in the corner of a big orange food truck. So if you could go to the next slide. That's some pictures of the people and the activities that we do there. So the food truck is an expression of our values, that we try to make those values hit the road, but also give people an idea of how food can play a role in your life, how ferments play a role in culture. So it's farmed, fermented, and foraged, and then finally presented to people in beautiful ways with healthy food. And just a shout out to Brittany Kelly, who did a gorgeous job doing those photos for us. And I think we have maybe one or two more slides. There's a few points here. I may need to turn around and use it as a cheat sheet to give you an idea of our business and how we're connected to the community. So we've got 10 people in our team, and it's all about people. And that's something that I can come back to, but really in the end, we're nothing without the team. We're in one location. We've got 2 radically different lines of business, 3 sales channels, 30 plus very local suppliers and business partners that we work with. We process, we serve about 1,000 farm to fork dishes a month. So in terms of restaurant scale, I think we're still probably on the smaller side. We process, we sell over 100 gallons of fermented foods per month, including fermented hot sauces, living ferments like crab. Each month, we might have a pallet of 1,000 pounds of beets coming that gets turned into a beet kvass, a beverage there. 12,000 gallons of fermented beverages sold a year, 100,000 cans. Most of that's in cans since the pandemic. So that was the main thing that I wanted to go through, just to show where we are in terms of, since 2012, starting out making a craft style ferment like sauerkraut, to now pretty broad in our interests. And part of that is you have to diversify to survive sometimes, and other times you have to focus. There's a give and take on that, but that's Iggy's.
That's what happens when you keep it on mute. Anyway, Anna with Restaurant Lola, please tell us about this. It still feels new to me.
It's still very new. We're about to hit 1 year on Halloween, so super excited. Hi everyone, I'm Anna Bressi. I'm co-owner and managing partner of Restaurant Lola. I am also principal at international financial services company Remitly, and the mother of a very crazy 1-year-old boy. So Restaurant Lola, like I said, we're about to be 1 year old. We are a 20-seat farm-to-table, almost fine dining, but more on the date night side restaurant. Our origin story, I grew up here. I grew up in Gorst, so don't tell anyone. I grew up here, did Running Start, graduated super early, traveled around, built my career for about 15 years. Met my now partner, Chef John Hall. Was like, ooh, pretty cute chef. Would you like to move back to Washington State? And after some convincing, we relocated back to the Washington State area, Puget Sound area. Thought we were gonna open a restaurant in Port Townsend. Worked on that project for about 1 year just to have the lease kind of ripped away from us. And in a moment of desperation, posted on the Kitsap County Dining Group, I don't know if y'all are in there, saying, hey, I'm looking to take over someone's restaurant who is looking to have a takeover to sell. Concerningly, I had about 30 people reach out to me in about 2 hours. But we found a great place over on the east side of Bremerton in between the 2 bridges, redid that space together while I was pregnant and gave birth to Luca. 2 months later, we opened, and if any of y'all were there, you may remember that I had Luca in a baby carrier while I was serving people at their tables. But 1 year in, we're super lucky. We've had lots of fanfare. We've been featured in the New York Times. We've been featured in Seattle Eater. We have a really great crop of regulars and new faces in every day. So super excited about the future and stoked to be here. Thanks, Kita.
Thank you.
Hello? Okay. My name's Cody Morgan. I'm owner and founder of Peninsula Bevco. And the origin story of what is now a 2-restaurant location and brewery starts with me coming, through South Kitsap School District and going to Olympic College, spending some time at Western Washington University and UW Seattle, just studying business and entrepreneurship. I always had that dream of living the entrepreneur lifestyle and trying to make something great for the world that way. So when I was about 21, I started home brewing some beer and with my friends, in my parents' backyard, and it was just so cool to make something from scratch that you put your passion into, and then had people try it later on and say that, hey, you gotta try, a brewery someday with this. And so that's when I dropped out of business school at UW. Funny enough, from the advice of my dean counselor, actually. He's like, man, you've taken all the classes you need to take. I wouldn't be afraid if you went off and tried to do what you wanted to do. So at that point, I dropped out, moved back to Port Orchard, and started what I learned in business school as an MVP, or minimum viable product, how you can make your business as small as possible, because I didn't have any money at all, no money. So I made a little tiny beer store. That's how we started 7 years ago. And just with a couple $1,000s, made a tiny little store. You'd come in, sample some beers, and leave with either a 6-pack or a growler. As we progressed, I've tried to grow the business, taking calculated risks, but they were risks all the way around. So the next step up was doing a tap room in downtown Port Orchard, which I opened about 1.5 years after that tiny little store. And we had some struggles there. They had a new buyer for the building we originally opened, and they ended up tearing that building down just like 6 months after we opened it. So we were only open there for 6 months with that tap room. Luckily, had another restaurant go out of business at the time, downtown Port Orchard, Amy's on the Bay, unfortunately. I used to work there, actually, for a summer. And so we took over this giant project of remodeling, a 6,000 square foot restaurant from all our blood, sweat, and tears. We didn't have any money to hire any contractors, so we did all the work ourselves, from the electrical to the plumbing to the woodworking to the redesign of everything. So it was, and that was during COVID. So it was a grueling time. We did takeout and delivery only when COVID started up, and social media was really, really important, that marketing, to get that message out there. And luckily, our communities really wanted to help support businesses, small businesses at that time. And they did everything they could to keep us afloat. We also ran a fundraiser at that time to raise money because we didn't have any money. So we raised about $45,000 from local friends, family, people from Port Orchard and Kitsap County, and that kind of gave us a little funds there. So we finally got that big restaurant open after a year and a half of construction, and we've been trying to progress ever since. And this last year, about a year ago, actually today, almost to the day, we bought a second restaurant location in downtown Silverdale by the waterfront. And it's a really nice restaurant. You should check it out. That one's called Peninsula Brew House. And we bought it because there's an already built brewery there. And so it was kind of another risk on the finances. This year has not been easy. But we're hoping to finally come full circle and brew our first batch of commercial beer in hopefully about February, I would say. So running restaurants is extremely hard. Right now, there's clear reasons why you see so many are going out of business, and I'm just hoping that we can take steps together. I'm hoping that some of the restaurants can start to come together and work together and talk about how to stay alive, and that some of our local governments can maybe have some grant programs or tax rebates or something locally, because otherwise you're going to keep seeing all these restaurants, especially full service ones, just go down. So that's kind of where we're at. We're very optimistic about our business's future, but realistic on the challenges that we face.
Well, let's pass that microphone to the left and go to Anna about some of those challenges. So whether you want to talk about a pain point in your business or the industry in general, please, if you could follow on.
Yeah, I think I could take this a lot of different ways. Lola is a very specific restaurant for a very specific reason. Right, we opened a 20-seat restaurant, not a 50-seat restaurant, not 70, not 100. And the reasons for that at a local level are very specific. One, the tax structure is very difficult for a small business like ours. Two, staffing is extremely difficult for a business like ours. Even with paying a living wage, for example, no salaried employee at Restaurant Lola makes less than $70,000 a year. So a very, very high living wage. And I think also just you're looking at partially being on this side of the sound, not having as many amenities. So when I was setting up our merchants or our vendors, calling high-end meat companies and saying, hey, I would like to get on your accounts, and then saying, oh, I'm sorry, we don't go to Bremerton. Would you like to drive to Bainbridge and pick up those steaks? And so I think you have a number of problems that compound and really impact small businesses like ours. We have responded to that by going super small. We call our concept a jewel box restaurant, because at a larger scale, and we have a 100-seat pizzeria in Birmingham, Alabama, at a larger scale, it gets much more difficult to manage when you are dealing with all of these compounded challenges that we deal with on this side of the sound.
Yeah.
So Paul, do you want to talk about what the big pain point or challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, there's as Anna said, there's a couple of different ways that I could go with that. As already mentioned, as a small business, and particularly if you want to source locally, you're deciding to pay more and work harder to get a better product, and then communicating the value of that to somebody. It's one of the reasons that we decided, as an answer to the influences we saw in the pandemic, to present it as a food truck. Because, and I honor you folks for this, doing a sit-down restaurant with service is incredibly hard. I love service, I love the métier of service, but our decision was to create approachability, given our location and our resources, focus all on the chefs, and present something that was finely crafted, that would be at home on a white tablecloth restaurant, but it was approachable in that it's just walk up and that chef is handing you that dish right through the window. So that was one of the ways we addressed the problem. I think the whole question of a living wage and tipping is painful for all of us. Tipping is something where somebody will see a price and you subtract the 20% or whatever your habitual tip is from that, and so you see that price. We elected, and this is not a commentary on restaurants that keep tipping because it's a necessary thing to do in a lot of structures, but just to highlight that a consumer, if they come to a place like ours where there is no tipping and see a price, and they go to a place where there is tipping and see a price, there are lots of internal calculations that go through about what is this food really worth. They may not see the craft that goes into my chef John, for example, making a brunoise of the veg just to have it just exactly right. They may not understand that those rabbits, those ducks, they came from Spring Rain Farm over in Chimacum, or the veg that came from there. So that's one context in terms of doing what you want to do. For Iggy's, our challenges were quite specific. We survived the pandemic. I'm very proud of that we made through that. But a lot harder than the pandemic was the county. The county DCD was actually the biggest threat to our business, and ended up being, I think, for a small business to do development, because we also lost our lease, and at a time of incredibly low inventory and commercial real estate, had to find a place. We crunched through that. We got it designed. We had the team ready to build it out. We were anticipating a 90-day permitting process that turned into a 320-day permitting process. So to keep the team and keep the company running was quite a challenge. So this is a unique challenge, I think, in any county where a small business, without the resources of a legal department, without the resources of a full-time architect or a general contractor to put on it, navigating development, moving into a new place, is an extreme challenge. And I think if the county and local businesses, organizations want to help small businesses increase, it will be by putting pressure on local compliance and regulatory agencies to provide the type of ombudsman or navigation services that are needed for a small business to complete a development project or succeed.
Well, two pieces of good news. First is, when you start talking about, okay, we're going to applaud that. So, the two pieces of good news are, one, when you talk about rabbits and local ducks, I think I really need to get up to Kingston and spend a lot more time there. The second is that, give us a week or so, but the county is tackling this problem. They have commissioned a report on it. They've done a national search for a new director, so they are actively working on this, and Keto will get that information out to this community in a bit. Let's, give me a week, because I gotta get links and PDFs and stuff. Questions for our food entrepreneurs? Anybody got a question for these folks? Going once?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. So,
Stephanie?
Yeah, so we've got one food truck, and we're in Kingston, so we've seen it before. But what was the reason behind you wanting a brick and mortar versus starting with with a food truck, which folks typically do.
So the question is, why did you guys go brick and mortar versus Paul not only sells kombucha in your stores and fermented foods, but has a food truck as well? So why did you guys go brick and mortar?
For us, for our style of dining, which we like to call elevated New American, the space of a food truck is pretty prohibitive. A lot of our dishes are extremely labor intensive. So you think like handmade pasta, handmade pastries, those take up a lot of space. And we can't necessarily count on the security of a commercial kitchen that we don't solely have dominion over for those types of things. Also, just to be frank, we are on the higher end of restaurants for this area in terms of quality, but also in terms of price. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not dropping $150 at a food truck. And so that would make it a little bit prohibitive for a concept like Lola.
Sorry, Paul, she's not dropping $150.
You'd have to work hard. You'd have to bring a big party.
Why brick and mortar, Cody?
I mean, I would love a food truck as well. I'd love to add one. We don't really have the finances at this time for that, or I don't have the bandwidth to plan that. But you know, the goal for me was to try to build a brewery, and of course, if you're going to do that, I mean, the highest profit margin is to have a tap room of your own, to sell beer by the pint or cider by the pint, whatever beverage you're making. And so I went down the road of I want to do a brewery. Breweries were a ton of money to build. And so it was like, get started with the tap room, then build the brewery, then you're your first customer. So our brewery is going to be set up really well in that regard because we have two pretty good sized restaurants to sell our great beer at when it is made. So I'm confident the brewery will be really successful. I've kind of put in 7 years to getting these restaurants going, so I'm hoping that will, and I feel confident that'll put that business in a really good place.
Excellent. Okay, one last question from probably John King. Do it, John.
I was curious if you could tell Washington any lessons that Alabama might be able to teach us.
Okay.
Do they do anything?
Lessons from Alabama. So that you're gonna, it's gotta go to Anna, I think. If you have lessons from Alabama.
Please take the question. They are wildly different states, so I feel like it's difficult to say one is necessarily better than the other. I will say Alabama does tend to be more friendly to small business. On the other hand, they are less friendly to individuals. So you kind of have to measure those back and forth, right? Like what may be good for me as a business owner perhaps would not be good there for my staff. And there's some give and take there for certain. Definitely during COVID, we saw markedly different handling of that. Again, for good and for bad, our pizza restaurant never closed. There was no closure mandate. So that pizza restaurant has been trucking the whole time. But we saw a dip in sales. My partner, John, worked every day. It's a 7-day concept, every day for 9 straight months in order to keep that restaurant open. So challenging there, but we do often ask ourselves, what will we do with Restaurant Lola, which is a fine dining sit-in establishment, if we have pandemic V2? I don't know that I have the answer for that, but I certainly try to keep my expenses low just in case.
All right, well, let's give this panel a hand, please. Appreciate you.